I was trying to figure out if I'm a
Yeah.
minute late, but I'm used to seeing a lot more people in the waiting room, but we don't care. We're going to have a lovely conversation. And at about uh, 10 till the hour, we'll open it up to questions. But for now, I get to ask all the questions. Morning, Kevin. Morning, Priya. So, Thata, the first question that oh, wait, I'm going to ask you to tell me how to pronounce your name properly.
Oh, it's Tato. The H is
Tato.
silent. Mhm.
The H is silent. Okay. So my first question that I always like to ask, because on the Filmmakers Live, I like to really look at how a filmmaker builds their career and how they get that going. So when was the first time that you knew that you wanted to be a filmmaker? Were you like three or?
Um, I grew up with my dad was a journalist, so I think for me, I always wanted to sort of be like him. I admired him a lot. He wrote about politics mostly. He actually was a journalist who ended up being a politician, and he ended up being a member of parliament in my country. But
Country was
he
that? Which country was that?
Botswana.
Botswana. Hmm.
Botswana. So, and I, every week I'll see his, articles on the newspaper, just kind of writing about political life and the situation in Botswana. So I wanted to do what he was doing. So when it was time for me to go to college, I actually decided to be a journalist. Um, and then I get to college, and then I got introduced to broadcast journalism. And the camera was just like, to me, was another level of interest that I never thought about. So and then I got into documentary filmmaking. That's what I really focused on, because broadcast journalism is mostly news, but we also did documentaries. So whenever we were asked to, in a class, whenever we were asked to do a documentary, that's when I really got into um, loving the process and loving uh, uh, just the process of making the film and exploring whatever issue I choose. And I like the freedom of just exploring whatever topic I wanted to tell, because with news, it's like you're following what is happening around the world and you're kind of like diverted to different directions based on whatever the breaking news is. But with documentary, you take your time to explain issues. So I remember in college, just loving developing documentaries. So I went to Emerson, and I'm in Boston, and I'm still in Boston. And when I graduated, I wanted to just continue making documentaries. And then for some reason, I started to have interest in fictional storytelling, but I've never kind of like written a script or made a narrative film. So I decided to actually enroll in a program, which is New York Film Academy.
Ah, yes.
And at that time, they were doing it at Harvard, and I enrolled in that 8-week program, filmmaking program. This is 2 years after I graduated. So, and that was it. Like, then I realized this is what I want to be doing, documentaries and also narrative film. I learned how to write a script in that program, and I made my first film. And right after, I mean, my first little film for the for college, for the program. And right after I graduated, I made my first film, Don't Tell Me You Love Me, which was based on was inspired by a poem titled "Don't Tell Me You Love Me" that my friend wrote, and it addressed domestic violence. And
Mm.
the poem moved me to a point where I took it and I asked her, "Can I just develop a story out of this?" And she was okay with it. So I wrote a script and I shot it, and the movie was called "Don't Tell Me You Love Me." It premiered at the Roxbury Film Festival in Boston. and it got to be used by domestic violence organizations across the city. And I even traveled to New York, some organizations in New York. I was invited, and I remember one time it was showing at Syracuse University. So it was just kind of mind blowing, the response that I got from that film, and I realized that. And I still love documentaries, but with fiction, I realized the power in being able. It's almost like there's an entertaining aspect of it, but in the process of people watching a film, you are learning. And I realized, oh, this may be actually how I can reach more audiences with the issues that I want to raise awareness about. So yeah, really, I went to college thinking I was going to be a journalist, and I ended up becoming a filmmaker, and that's
When,
how.
when you grew up in a journalist household, was journalism sort of a noble profession? Was it something that could be dangerous? Was it how did it seem to you as you were growing up?
From early on, my dad actually transitioned to kind of politics when probably before I was 10 years old, but he always sort of was a writer. And even during the time he was a politician, he continued to write. He published some books. So in Botswana, because the it's a very stable politically, it's a very stable country. There isn't the government is at the time the government was uh, it was safe for journalists, I should say. And and then my dad joined politics based on his being a journalist. You find out a lot of stuff, a lot of things that are working, that are not working, and why things are working. So he ended up actually joining politics because of his journalism, just
Ah.
realizing that he can do something about it, that he can go in and change some laws or advocate for people from the inside rather than just covering the news. But it was safe at the time. But I do know that the current situation in Botswana, so there are some journalists that are exiled from the country. I don't think it's dangerous yet. I hope it doesn't get to a point where it's dangerous, but I think people have the freedom of speech. They can criticize the government. My dad was in opposition all his life. Um, he did work for the government as a journalist. He was working for the government newspaper, and he covered the first president. He traveled with him all over the world. But I think all of that, being an insider, opened his eyes to actually join opposition politics, because there were some things that he didn't like. And I think it's in general. I grew up in an opposition household where it was just like my dad was highly critical of the government, constant, like he would write. And the good thing is with my dad, he had relationship with the media. The media loved him, and the media actually were, for the most part, and they still are, on the side of the opposition all the time, very critical of the government. Unless it's a government newspaper. So I think it was safe to
Mhm. Yeah.
just,
So
yeah.
it didn't seem as though it was a dangerous profession to go into, at least.
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, it was dangerous in a way that then opportunities are shut out for you. Like you're not getting the jobs. Like if you're a journalist, I think it definitely is. Um, it's not the career you choose if you want to live a great life.
I think that I don't know. For me, journalism is such a noble profession. I just was this weekend. I was sick and I was watching Spotlight, and I'm
Mm,
like, why am I watching Spotlight for the sixth time? I know what's going to happen.
yeah.
Why am I watching it? And then I was so inspired watching it again. I decided to watch All the President's Men again. And just I just love films about journalism and journalists. And so it was interesting when you said about being exposed to broadcast journalism, and that just opened up this, whole new world. I worked for an organization called Youth Radio, and they train young people to be broadcast journalists. And that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. They're in Oakland, but anytime if you listen to the National Public Radio, anytime you hear a story by a youth, it's always Youth Radio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea. I work with, I work with young filmmakers, and some of them want to go into that, broadcast, because I do have a class, a TV broadcasting class. So it'd be interesting to introduce my kids to.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They're actually called. They changed their name to YR Media.
Okay.
So maybe somebody can put that in the chat. yrmedia.org, I think it is. Actually, I have a meeting with them tomorrow. But yeah, they train young people to be broadcast journalists, and they're in Oakland, and I work for them running their $5 million capital campaign for their lovely building, state-of-the-art facility. It's really a fantastic organization, yrmedia.org, I think it's called.
Okay.
Yeah, your students will love it. Then one of the things that I think is really interesting about your career path is that I find a lot of documentary filmmakers, when I meet a filmmaker, oh my gosh, John, hello, nice to see you. When I talk to a filmmaker for the first time, I often, they'll tell me, they're making a documentary. And one of the questions I always want to know is, do you have secret ambitions to be a fiction filmmaker? And some answer yes and some answer no. So some documentary filmmakers are really clear. I am a documentary filmmaker. That is it. That is it. And then others are like, well, I'm making a documentary because that's all I know how to do, or something, or I'm making a documentary because I don't have any money to make, or whatever. So making that transition, I think, is something that many people would like to make. What do you think, as a narrative filmmaker now, what do you think you bring as a journalist and a documentary filmmaker? What do you think you bring to the table?
That's interesting. What do I think I bring to the table? I mean that, being someone from Africa who is sort of like concerned about, especially the plight of women. What I have been kind of grappling with is the idea of, do documentaries really make a difference, and who is the audience who watches documentaries, right? I'm right now working on an issue, on a fictional film that is based on a problem that is happening in Botswana, which is the sexual abuse of young women. And I decided to write a fictional script based on that, and that is called The Blue Dawn. But I could choose a documentary, right? But I always felt like you can address issues. You have more of a broader audience with a fictional. I don't know why. Because whenever people think documentary, I think the audience for documentaries are usually sort of highly educated, the people that watch PBS. It really doesn't spill out. And because I work with youth, I see the response of young people. Whenever I say I have a documentary versus I have a movie to watch, they get more excited about a movie. But if that movie addresses the things that the documentary addresses, then the message has reached, right? So I go back and forth with that, because I know I am the audience for a documentary. But I know a lot of people, even my friends, some of my friends don't really watch documentaries. And I'm like, I'm obsessed with documentary. But who is the audience, and how, when you do a a film in Botswana, a documentary about an issue in Botswana, is it gonna reach the people in Botswana, the people in the village? You know, who are you talking to? Who's the audience? Most of the time, the audience is the same, and most of the documentaries end up you know, in film festival circuits and then like they end up being picked up if you're lucky by PBS or something like so they're not really distributed widely enough to reach the people that need to be reached. So the transition for me, I think your question was about transition.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I think because for me, it's like, it's the same thing. Like, does this lend itself to a documentary or does it lend itself to, but it's the same issue that I'm tackling through, you know, whether it's a narrative film or this. I think it's definitely tougher to, because I think with a documentary, it's easy. I can just pick up my camera, interview a few people, I can actually do a documentary with a zero budget, just
Uh-huh.
based on, you know, going around and interviewing people and trying to, but then with a fictional film, now that's a whole nother issue. It
Right.
takes money to make a film
Yeah.
because every single person is hired to perform, whether it's like the actors, you don't have to pay interviewees for a documentary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So um, it's I I'm kind of I go back and forth, and I don't know. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. For me, my favorite films tend to be films based on real life.
Yeah.
And even when you see a film poster or something like that that says based on a true story, I mean, it's definitely a marketing point, you
Yeah.
know, when a
Mhm.
story is based on the truth. And, you know, and we're living in a time today where the truth is sort of being attacked. You know, misinformation is the order of the day. So I think people have a kind of longing for the truth and for authenticity.
Mhm.
So I wonder when you had your experience of with the domestic violence film "Don't Tell Me You Love Me," which was a short film, but you saw that it was actually used by domestic violence organizations. I'm wondering if that was some part of your learning about audiences and who you wanted to reach. Did you feel that that film was really reaching the people you wanted to see it?
Absolutely. I think I had no idea in terms of just distribution and marketing and all of that. I just made a film because I was so moved by the poem. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make a film. And I made it and it got into a festival. And from then on, a couple of people saw it and they told, you know, so it just the word spread around. I did not market it. And I think I remember going around Boston with the film, like when I was invited by Boston Public Library to screen it for the public free screenings. It did reach the people it needed to reach because the domestic violence organizations did a great job of getting um, people that they help to watch the film. So I remember the conversations that came out of there. And the audience was definitely people that were affected by the issue. So I think it worked out really well, especially when you align yourself or when you have organizations that are already working on that issue that support the film or that see the value in actually sharing the film. So I think it worked out really well in terms of reaching the audience in Boston.
One of the things that I talk to a lot about with my clients is that when you have a theme like domestic violence in a film, I have a client right now working on something to do with mental health, and another client working on a short film to do with cancer. That there are definitely similar ways that you can work with the documentary world, you know, that you can
Yeah.
work with other organizations. Can I ask you a question about money? You know, was that something that actually brought in revenue for you as a filmmaker, doing that work with all of those nonprofits?
Yeah, so for every appearance, which was something that I didn't expect, to be honest, that was, like I said, that was something that I didn't plan through. It was like, let me make this film. And I had a little bit of money because I was working in a nonprofit. I was working in nonprofit myself, and it was self-funded, made with friends who were performers. But what surprised me was the checks that I was getting whenever I made an appearance, whenever I showed up. So a lot of those organizations, they would invite me to come and speak, to show the film, even some universities, and I would get a check. So um, it covered the whatever went into the film and even beyond. And I think it was like 2 years and 2 years of that, where it was just continuous, enough that maybe, because I made that film in 2005, about, I think last year someone reached out to me to ask about the film, and I was like, I don't even know where the DVD is, because that's the time of, I just had to look for the DVD because we moved houses. But I was surprised by that request, and they were wondering if I have another film in the making that's similar, because it was very impactful. I think the ending, people resonated with the ending because the ending wasn't bow tied, like it was more realistic, and that's the response that I got, even from the audience. People were like, this is so real. What this woman is going through and how you ended the film was real, instead of ending it with a happy ending. um, so I learned a lot, and I was surprised by that. I do think that most of the time people think with the documentaries, you documentaries, somehow you have this association with nonprofits that work on, but even fictional films
Yes.
with the same message, or with a strong message that whatever nonprofits are trying to raise awareness could work as well as the documentaries that are used by nonprofits. Yeah.
And they can be shorts, they don't have to be features.
Yeah, they can
You
be
know,
short.
in fact, as a programmer, if I want to program, say, a 2 hour event, and I can program, a short for 15 or 20 minutes and then have the rest of the time for conversation, that's kind of, what I want to have happen.
Yeah, I
But
didn't think about it that way. I'm
yeah,
glad you brought that up, because now I have to think about that. But let me just say, this is clueless me making my first film just out of passion, pure passion, no planning whatsoever. My film was 40 minutes, and boy, did I learn. For film festivals, that is not a short, and it's not a feature either. So you're like sort of like stuck in limbo, where some people are like, it's too long for, like, we don't know where to. So I learned, I mean, the good thing is it was embraced by this organizations that supported it, and I traveled, I got checks for it. But in terms of film festival programming, it was very difficult. I did show it at oh yeah, at MIT. MIT had this chick make flicks program. I don't think they're running it. um, and that was a great event. But to be honest, for film festivals, it didn't, other than Roxbury really highlighting it, embracing it, and celebrating it, because Roxbury is a local film festival, well-established film festival for the people of the African diaspora. And I think it also, it showed in New York at African Diaspora Film Festival in New York, but it didn't make I don't think I submitted it to a lot of film festivals anyway, because submissions equal money.
uh-huh.
But thinking about it now, I will echo what you just said. 15 to 20 minutes, that is, if you're thinking of a short, 10, 15, 20 minutes is like the best time.
But I also think what you're saying is really important, because I got accused the other day of being anti-film festivals. And I'm like, well, I'm not anti-film festivals. What I am anti is filmmakers thinking that's the only place for their films. you know,
Yeah.
because clearly this film was seen by the audiences who needed to see it, and they were not necessarily going to film festivals,
Yes.
you know.
And
So,
you know, the audience for film festivals, that's another conversation. It's
right,
really a special kind of, it's like film lovers and mostly film professional like people, because I attend film festivals because I'm a filmmaker. I want to know what people are doing, and but yeah, it's you have to think about who you want to reach and where they are.
yes, yes. So when I tend to meet filmmakers who are making their first short or their first feature, they're always focused on film festivals, and I'm just like, let's just broaden the the possibilities here, you know.
Yeah.
So so now you have made a feature. So what was it like to make that transition from shorts to a feature? Because you mentioned the thing that usually comes up, like, what about the money?
Yeah, it was scary. It was scary. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And of course, um, and then I very naively chose the script that is the hardest to produce. Um, it's the most commercial script that I have, because most of the stuff that I do is I'm kind of like addressing issues of uh, people from the African diaspora, mostly African women, right? It's not commercial. Like the type of films that I make, or the type of issues that like I'm more of a documentary, and even when I do fiction, I'm looking at serious issues that are not seen as commercial. This film was inspired by my students. It was one of those things where, okay, I'm gonna write a film for my students so they can see themselves. Um, they can see themselves in the reflected in the film, because I was frustrated. I couldn't find films that had positive, protagonists, especially Black girl protagonist. So out of that frustration,
Especially
I wrote
black high
this.
school girls, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly, because I was teaching in a predominantly brown and black high school at the time, teaching film, and of course, as a teacher, like as a film teacher, I'm showing a lot of films to my students, and I could not find content for them, content that they could connect with. And I ran out of content, and I was like, why are people not making films that, especially coming of age films, that focus on Black girls and the Black girls that are positive role models, role models. So I wrote it. It is commercial because it's was considered urban, right?
Oh, tell
And,
everyone the name of the film.
Memoirs of a Black
We're
Girl.
talking
Yes, thank
because
you.
we know what we're talking about.
Thank you, Lexi. So Memoirs of a Black Girl. So I was like, okay, I'll write something for my students, and they had input in it, and we had fun reading. And I remember one time I didn't even know what I was gonna do with it. It started off as a short, and then I went to do my MFA in stage and screen, in writing for stage and screen, and I decided to expand it. But at that time, I had left that school. I was in another school. Um, and I chose to do that one because I was like, if I'm going to invest in a film, I would choose the one that is maybe the most marketable or commercial. But I didn't think about what it will be like directing a cast of 50 people over. Because when you think about it, this is high school, right?
Yes, yes.
And
Lots of kids,
you
lots of
have
kids.
to rent the school. That's a cost. You have to
Mm.
rent a bus. You have to fill the bus. You have to fill that, at least the portion of the portion where you're shooting, whether it's the hallway, the locker area, the bathroom, the classroom. And you have to find extras that will show up. And the only way to guarantee that the extras will show up, because if you have a scene in the classroom and some the actors don't show up, it's not realistic. I'll probably cancel production. So in order to guarantee that, you have to pay those extras. Because some extras you don't have to pay. And we kept maybe about 15, 20 extras on payroll. And we're like, we are shooting at a school, you are going to be, and it was like the same extras that stuck around with us during production, just so we are not in a situation where we are in a hallway and it's just the three actors without movement, without it looking like a school. So I did not think through all of that. It was definitely overwhelming. I needed a speaker, like a, what do you call it? It's
A megaphone.
a microphone,
Megaphone.
a megaphone to deal with that like coordination. But fortunately, I had a great team that helped manage that, and continuity was also a big issue, because you, as in a film, you shoot out of sequence, right? Like it's not chronological. So it was having to make sure that this is day one outfit. And in this day one, when we go home, they get home wearing this outfit that we shot, that they wore 5 days ago. So it was just like the logistic of keeping, but we did a great job. To be honest, it's just amazing how we pulled it off. It was a miracle.
Tell everybody what the basic story is of the film.
So, Memoirs of a Black Girl is about this girl who discovers a smart, brilliant girl who is up for a scholarship, top scholarship in the city. She is one of the finalists, one of the three finalists, and she has to write her, get a good score for her SATs, and also do well in the interview. So that's her goal. But what happens is she discovers this girl, this group of girls are smoking in the bathroom, and the smoke somehow got to her because she was in the next stall. And she's accused of smoking, and the the teacher who catches her in the hallway pressures her to actually give up the students' names. And she's looking at maybe even losing, because if she's accused of smoking, she potentially could lose the scholarship. So she gives up the students' names, and then she's labeled a snitch, and the rest is what happens in the film. Just the bullying that happens to her, and what the girls do to make her life miserable. It's essentially about bullying, and also never giving up, and being kind of just addressing the issues that happen in high school, because I see a lot of that as a high school teacher.
You know, when I saw your film, it took me back to my first couple of years, I guess, in America. I was living in Miami. I cannot remember what the occasion was, but I was in a high school that was, 99.9% Black in Miami. And we were doing some presentation. I can't remember what it was. But so there were three of us at the front, and we said, okay, so we'd like to have somebody volunteer to come up here and do something or other. I don't know what it was. And maybe one child raised their hand, and we said, oh, come down. And the rest of the auditorium, full of high school kids, jeered that child. And I had never seen anything like that. I didn't know that that's what an American high school experience was like. I had never experienced anything like that in England. And I was teaching at the University of Miami. So I was teaching college age kids, and I was teaching English. And from my perspective, all Americans pretty much have been traumatized by by their English teachers and by high school. And this is just me, my experience not having grown up here, and I don't know if I would have survived American high school, frankly. you know, but that was an amazing experience for me to realize that children who were the ones who were brave enough to raise their hand would be picked on and bullied, which is exactly the story of your film. You know, it's exactly that story. Here's this girl who she's like, I'm going to college, that's what I'm doing, I'm going to be great, you know, and I'm getting out of here. But all the forces that move against that to pull her down. It's a very, very well told story. Very well
Thank
told.
you. Thank you.
How long did it take you to make it?
So at the writing, this was written, I think I completed it probably um, about 6 years ago. Um, but the script has gone through sort of like it evolved along the way. I went back to it, polished it. I also brought it to grad school to kind of make it a little more whole. And then I decided to shoot it in 2019. And thank God we did the production then. So post production was in 2020. We were supposed to actually fundraise, and our fundraising events were upended because March 10th is when it shut down. We had just had a fundraising launch, the Indiegogo launch, end of February, and 10 days later, COVID hit, the world shut down, and our Indiegogo, we never got to the number that we needed for post-production. Fortunately, I work as a teacher, so sometimes I use my money, and I decided let's just figure out a way to finish it. And and then sometimes I have like side jobs to do PSAs or commercials, mostly PSA for those organizations that pays me whenever they need like a product. So I was already wrapping up a project with them, and I was able to use that money to finish the film. And so the film wrapped. We finished post-production November of 2020.
Great. So you're going into distribution now. So when will we be able to see the film?
We don't know. I mean, it's just distribution is just conversations happening, and it's just trying to figure out uh, what's best for the film. So we're hoping that maybe by the end of the year,
Right.
people will get to see the film. And right now, it's making its rounds in the film festival circuit. It will be, I think, I'm not sure if it's confirmed, but it's supposed to be the opening film for Roxbury Film Festival
Nice.
in Boston. I mean, that's where it was shot. The film is based in Roxbury, so we're excited about that, which is in a couple of weeks, and it's showing in Canada, Hamilton Film Festival in Canada. It's showing in 2 weeks on the film festival, and Martha's Vineyard Film Festival in August. So right now we're just having those distribution conversations, but also waiting for it to finish its tour, film festival tour, I
Are
think.
you feeling as though this film fits more into the festival world than the long short?
The launch shot. I think so. I mean, I did make the choice based on just the theme of the film, and I knew that it's probably more commercial than the things that I do. I don't do. This film is so different from the things that I do, and I don't expect my narrative. Like right now, A Blue Dawn is based on um, it's based on a life of a girl in Botswana village, a village schoolgirl who is sexually abused by the teacher. So those are like, it's kind of like, it's not commercial. Like some people don't want to see that, but for me, it's important to address those things, right? And I'm more passionate about those issues because I feel like this is happening, and some of the ways we could deal with it is to raise awareness by making a film that then will have a conversation, especially in Botswana. My vision is to have that film travel across Botswana in different villages so we can talk about these issues. Can it be a documentary? It could, right? It can be a documentary. So yeah, Memoirs of a Black Girl definitely is like the most commercial.
I'm not sure that you even know this about me, but anyway, I'm half Trinidadian.
Mm.
And so I think it's been a long time since I've heard anybody use the word village. But in Trinidad, we talk about villages all the time. That's like, standard. And so there's this sense, I think, working in in the second world or the third world, that we know that people are not being reached. Even, I mean, hey, we don't have to go outside America to know that people are not being reached, as I was saying before, with the truth, just with the simple truth. But with something like this, with such an important topic as that, you know, I just really look forward to seeing that film as well, because I think perhaps because of your experience with the short, you see that that there are ways of distribution that may not look like traditional distribution, but in the documentary world, that is traditional distribution.
Yeah.
You know, you set up your screen,
Recipes. Yeah.
right? Yeah, universities, community organizations, nonprofits, and you work on reaching that audience. And I think a lot of filmmakers don't think that way about their films, but really that's the right way to be thinking about the film, because it's up to the filmmaker to find that audience that in this case needs to see that film, you
Mhm.
know
Yeah.
so, and I have to say, as a fundraiser, that's something that's very, very, very much that you can get support from. You can fundraise to do that kind of distribution.
Mhm.
I don't know quite what it's community engagement. It's called audience engagement is kind of the most recent term. Impact producing, those kind of terms. So it's just so interesting to talk about fiction in this way when that's usually reserved for talking about documentary. But once you're dealing with an issue like that in your film, then it's absolutely possible, and I would say essential and great for bringing in income to do that kind of distribution. Maybe it would be called educational distribution as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, those, getting that film to those villages that I can imagine how far away they are
Yeah.
in Botswana.
And
Or,
even Memoirs of a Black Girl,
yes.
I screened on Monday at my high school for,
Mhm.
we have certain days reserved for conversations in my high school
Uh-huh.
in Brookline. I don't know if anyone know Brookline, Massachusetts.
I
Um,
know it just because one of my clients wrote a beautiful script set there in the 50s.
oh, really? So it's a very wealthy neighborhood, predominantly Jewish, but the high school is very eclectic. It has more of an international. It looks, when you go into Brookline High School, it's like international, right? Students are from everywhere: Israel, uh, Korea, lots of Japanese students, Indian, African American, African. So every time I walk into the highway, I walk into Brookline High School hallway, it's just like amazing how it's a melting pot. And that's Brookline because the people that are attracted to Brookline is near hospitals. So there's a lot of people that are doing their PhD or that are working um, nearby as medical professionals. So there's that attraction, I guess, to Brookline. So we have this day called a Day of Dialogue. and there is a day of there's like certain days that are allocated for where people will talk about. So there's this day on Monday was a day to address to have conversation about racial awareness and also racial justice. Just students get to talk about their own experiences in Brookline as people of color, whether you are Asian or Black or Latino, Native American. So they chose this film because some of the staff members saw it. They chose it as a film that will end the program at night. So what I'm learning is that I'm getting requests from different high schools already to actually show the film. And I showed it to a group of young girls. It's a program run by Boston Police Women, who are Black police women who created this program for young Black girls. And it's a mentorship program. One of the policewomen saw it, and they invited me and some of the actors to show the film. So it's somehow, I didn't expect it to also be sort of like a community film, but I'm getting interest from different high schools that want to have conversations, show the film, and then have conversations. So I'm hoping that this will also be another Don't Tell Me You Love Me, in a way where it's really the organizations that support or the educational programs or institutions that want to actually use the film for awareness or educational purposes.
The documentary Bully that was made, I don't know, 9, 10 years ago now or something, they still have a full-time staff of 3 people who get bully out into the community. I mean, just that issue. There are many other issues that you address in your film, but that issue of bullying is a huge topic that I'm sure students want to talk about. And all I would say is that there are going to be foundations out there who will pay you good money to go do your screenings.
Oh, I hope so.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. We'll talk.
I hope so. Yeah, so I'm hoping, because I mean, I did it just so I can inspire my students, and I was thinking about especially kids in the urban schools. There's so many issues, but I did this film to reach them in a way that maybe they will see themselves reflected in the film and consider some of the, if they are on the other side of where there are bullies, maybe they'll reconsider. So we've had really great conversations with young girls, especially the police group. Those young girls were really honest in, some of the conversations I had with them were really honest in what they saw in the film, things that have happened to them. So I'm hoping there'll be more of that in the future.
So gratifying to have that kind of response. And I think another thing that filmmakers miss out on is having these kind of screenings, community screenings, and having the opportunity to have an audience and talk to people and get that instant feedback, that you can't get through traditional distribution. It's very gratifying, right? I just wonder if anybody has any questions for Tato. And, I love it if you raise your hand. Diane. Yes, go ahead, Diane.
Good morning. Thank you so much. This is just so incredibly inspiring. I have so many questions actually, but so I'm making my first feature, and it's a documentary about. I'm looking at the stories of 7 female artists who have transcended the experience of sexual trauma, physical trauma, and it's based on my own story of transcending a beating and a rape in 2010. And right now I'm just going through that process of really honing down exactly who I want to reach, and obviously that's challenging. I'm very grateful for Joanne but a lot of it, in terms of, emphasizing, I've started working with show and tell and emphasizing the idea of looking at other audiences other than film festivals, though I see that as being a valuable route as well, just because, again, the kind of the Q&A and the fact that you can actually reach people with this. And I guess, and the first films that I've made about this subject are shorts. They were narrative shorts that that either dealt with it in a more surreal manner because it was when I was in school, or a very literal story. And so I guess any advice you would have about because I realize that I'm starting to look at who I really want to reach, and it is younger women, and it is women that I still feel like that voice obviously is so important around this, and the fact that it is a subject that people don't really want to talk about. And if you have any sort of advice or recommendations around that, because I love the fact that you obviously, I mean, you're a high school teacher, but you do focus on those earlier, your women that are your students' age, and how it is that, I mean, your descriptions of high school and the bullying that goes on at that point. But that is the point at which so many of us, myself included, were really shut down around having voice around this. So I don't know if that's a really clear question, but it's just that, like, what would you recommend in terms of creating, I don't know, building audience around stuff like that? Does that make sense? I don't know if I articulated that well.
Yes.
That's a good question. So you are trying to figure out how to really hone in on your audience. It also depends on, I think for me, because I have like right now I'm kind of like down, having been teaching high school for the longest time. I feel like that age group is my audience with whatever
Right.
I'm going to do next. And I know that the way they connect to material is seeing themselves reflected.
Right.
Like if you are tackling issues that they care about or that they will connect to. And I think that's really essentially whatever you're doing in your content. The subject of your film is how old are they?
So yeah, and so most of the women that we're speaking to, the youngest woman is probably in her early 30s. So they are adult women that have gone through this, as
Yeah.
opposed to teenagers or women in their
Yeah.
early 20s.
Yeah.
There is a possibility of obviously bringing younger women into this, because I feel like I do have a number of interns that are working on the project that are in college, and then also starting to bring in a high school student,
Yeah.
and working with someone who works with high school students. Because obviously, though I want to reach all women, it truly is about how do we start in, supporting women and having voice around everything, but
Yeah.
very specifically about very difficult topics like sexual assault. And
Can I answer this a little bit? I think that there are two ways to think about it. One is there are the audience that you get that maybe you don't even know is your audience, and then there's the audience you would like to get. And so I have a feeling that if all of your 7 women who are the subjects of your film are 30 and up, your audience is going to be 30 and up. I suspect. Right. So if you say, well, but I want, my goal is to reach,
younger women.
the clue that I just got was when you said, I want to reach all women. That's not a possibility.
That's not realistic.
Not a possibility. So there needs to be some targeting of the audiences that you want to reach. And, I loved Thato's story about in Brookline, starting with these organizations in Brookline, and then sort of finding out, oh my gosh, these people are all interested in this film. And then you can kind of expand that. But I think that it's kind of, it's very common to sort of think, I want to reach that audience instead of who is my audience?
Right.
And you know, I would also add that you could, out of the 7 women, there could be a high school student and a college
Right.
student. And depending on your promotion, if you're promoting, if you want to, for the film to be used in high schools or colleges, then your packaging will highlight the story of the
Right.
women in the
Right.
in the film. But they get to know about this issue because this issue affects women of all generations.
Right.
Tomorrow, I was talking about the day offs that we have in Brookline. Yesterday was LGBTQ community. Tomorrow is actually sexual abuse, sexual violence. And this is high school. And all day tomorrow, we're going to have these conversations. There are so many incidents that happen on a weekly basis in high school.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
horrifying.
so it's not an issue that is really for older women. We see it at high school level, and it's so scary. And if we are not actually addressing that at that age, and also teaching boys, you know, like including them in the conversation, because they are going to become men. They're going to go to college and do the frat parties and do whatever boys do sometimes. I was just reading about Brock Turner. For some reason, his story came back, and I saw a video of the victim. So the other day, but that's in college, you know, like it was very normal what he did, and because it happens, it's just that he got caught. So my point is, I think if you do indeed want to reach younger audiences, you want to include a younger voice in there, because those girls are affected. Girls as young as 14, 15, 16 have had those experiences. And my film is based on a true story that actually happened in Botswana. And out of that came a movement of women that were fed up with these cases, because this case was about this 15-year-old girl who was impregnated by a 40-year-old man. And he had to drop out of high school. So my film is similar to that, but it turned out that because that case drew outcry from women, including the first lady in Botswana, there were protests across the country. A lot more women shared, and the women that were sharing, they were talking about when they were 11, when they were 12, all the stuff that we didn't know were happening to young women. And there's some young women shared their own stories. And I remember reading that and I was like, what can I do? Like, I was just moved. And, you know, like, I'm also a survivor too. So I wanted to do something. And I'm focusing on a 15-year-old girl. And I know it's not easy that's not a palatable.
It's not easy to talk about that, right?
Yeah, it's not palatable, and it's also triggering, right? But it's like, we need to talk about these things, because these things are happening, especially at a young age, you know, because I think in the media, we focus on adult women.
Exactly, it's more palatable.
Yeah, but we don't want to talk about the young teenagers who are violated, you know, very tricky situations too.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Because I know that on social media, my audience is younger. So anyway, I do thank you so much for your time.
And see if we could take one more question. I know we're at time, but Jonathan, so good to see you all the way from Trinidad.
Hi everyone. Hi Thato. I love your earrings, love your accent, love your story. I just had a comment. I'm from Trinidad as well. Hi, Joanne. I was just wondering if you ever thought about self-distribution for your own films, for your own documentaries, within your own your own village, your own space. That just came to my mind because Joanne had on her Facebook group page, where all of us, and she advertised Recharge Your Distribution by Peter Broderick and Keith. And I would strongly advise anybody who's into documentary, into filmmaking, to take that course. It's an 8-week.
I didn't know you were taking that course, Jonathan.
It was beautiful, Joanne. It was totally beautiful. I mean, and even answering Diane's question, it's virtual events, virtual screenings, reaching out to the partners. So I was just wondering if you ever thought about that.
Actually, my first film never got distribution. It was just exactly that, like people just reaching out to me and asking for the film, and I owned it 100%. So I think it was nice to get that check. For this one, maybe, like, if distribution doesn't work out, because right now we're just looking at distribution. I certainly think that, I would love to take that course, because there's a lot, you have more control of your content or your product when you self-distribute.
I really think that what they talk about, and if you go to Keith Archwat's Show and Tell, because he developed this platform to be able to do virtual screenings, but I think really what they would promote, and they're mostly talking to documentary filmmakers, but as we've been talking today, this totally works when you have a short film that has a real theme, or even a feature that has a real theme that foundations can get behind, nonprofits, organizations, high schools, colleges, whatever can get behind. So I really think what they're advocating is a very hybrid model. So a mixture of, I wouldn't necessarily call it self-distribution, because I think it's in the community engagement education space, as well as doing traditional distribution, and all of those things can live perfectly happily together.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Taking advantage of all the doors, opening all the doors, there's no reason to not do that. There's no reason to close some of the doors. You can have it all. You can have it all.
Yeah, you definitely can't do it all on your own.
No.
And based on what I've heard from your stories, that way, just like it could reach a lot of people. It have a lot of institutions who could see themselves being aligned with your messages, because they have so many different themes in your storytelling. So it's like you could choose whichever one, and that is what is so beautiful about documentary filmmaking, with all these different themes. So it's like it's an easy sell, but it's just knowing how to go through that process. It's that's why I recommend that hybrid class to anyone. And thank you so much, Joanne, because if it wasn't for Joanne, I would not have known about it and being a part of her network. Because I know just one of these talks, I was in one of these talks that Joanne has with Brian Storm from Media Storm, and it, that idea just started coming to my mind. It's like, why don't we sell our own content? Why don't we? We are the best ones who involve in it. Yes. Why don't we at least try to? So that's why it started coming around in my head, and then all of a sudden I saw Joanne promoting this class, and that's why I took the class. So that's why I just said, hey, let me share. So
I'm so glad you're doing that. I want to let Tato leave. She just ran in from high school, so. I just want to thank you so much. What a lovely conversation. I'm so looking forward to when people get to see your film. So I think we've been putting your website up. So if you happen to be in the places that the film is screening at a festival, Memoirs of a Black Girl, take advantage, and it'll be out eventually that we can all see it, I'm sure. But thank you so much. for
Thank
taking the
you so
time.
much for the invitation. This was a lovely conversation, and thank you for having me.
Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
to
you.
see
It's
you
great
all.
to see everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Joanne.
Bye.
Thanks, Joanne.